Okay, great. So this week's Parsha Nasso. Um, we're interesting obviously in Israel, this Parsha has already been read, this past Shabbos, but we still have to read it because obviously we had Shavuot Friday and Shabbos, so Nasso got delayed a week. Just a little tidbit is that Parshat Nasso is the single longest reading in the Parsha. Obviously, we do get Parshiot which are joined together, but this is the longest single reading in the Parsha. And we've got various themes that run through the Parsha. We've got, and it seems to be jumping from one theme to the other. Begin with the counting of the families of Levi. Then the Parsha discusses those people who must leave the camp due to ritual impurity. We have laws regarding theft and confession. We have the episode or the laws of the soiter, the suspected adulteress. We have the Nazarite, we have the Birkat Kohanim, and the last section of the Parsha, quite a lengthy section, is the offerings that all the princes, the leaders of the tribes brought for the inauguration of the temple. And, at first glance, there doesn't seem to be anything that connects them one to the other. But what I always try to do, in the shiurim is try to find something that connects all the various episode stories, concepts that are discussed in this parasha. Possibly the link that we can find with all these various disparate parts is actually found at the very beginning of the parasha, where it says Nasso et Rosh, lift up the heads. We know that's a terminology used before in Torah to mean count. Torah could simply have said count, but instead it uses a language of elevation. And again, as we've said before, Judaism doesn't only count people, but Judaism lifts people up. And perhaps this could be the central theme of the entire parsha, that Nassau isn't about a burden, um, but it's about the privilege of carrying things, and it's the privilege of spiritual greatness. And if we think about in this parsha, and I'll go through it briefly now, it deals with people carrying something. So the Leviim, the family of the Levites, they carry the Mishkan. The sinner carries guilt. The suspected adulteress, she carries suspicion. The Nazir carries responsibility because he takes certain things upon himself. The Kohanim carry the blessings of the Jewish people. And the Nesiim, the leaders of the tribes, they carry the responsibility of leadership. And of course, ultimately, every one of us, every Jewish person carries something as well. So the question is, what we carry, is it something that feels like a burden? Or is it something that, yes, even though it may be heavy and may be difficult, nevertheless, we're able to see how it lifts us up, how it elevates us. So I want to go through each of the portions. Hopefully, we can try cover them all in the time permitting, and then see how it hopefully all connects at the end. So, as I said, the parasha begins with the carrying of the Mishkan and the counting of the families of Gershon, Kahat, Merari, and the Torah describes in great detail what each family carried in the Mishkan, or what part of the Mishkan, the tabernacle that they carried. So one carried the curtains, another carried the beams, another the sockets, covering. So each had a specific role, a specific item to carry. And why does the Torah give up so much time describing, this is logistics, right? There could have been a logistics manager in place. Let him worry about it. Why does the Torah have to tell us all of these details? What can we learn from it? Again, perhaps the lesson is that the Mishkan, this tabernacle, couldn't travel unless everyone did what they were supposed to do, unless everyone carried their particular piece. Some of them carried the holy vessels, right? The iron, etc. Some carried the boards, some carried the fabrics, as I've said. And obviously, some items appeared less glamorous than others. Some carried items that nobody would even notice, right? They seem so lowly, so insignificant. But the truth is that without every single piece of that Mishkan being there and obviously being carried from where it had to go, the Mishkan, the tabernacle couldn't function. So yes, they're going to be people that carry the Holy Ark. They're also going to be people that carry the pegs. But the message from the Torah is both carriers, all the carriers are equally holy. And what tends to happen in life, possibly one of the greatest dangers in life, is comparing ourselves to someone else, comparing our life to someone else, our role to someone else. We might think, if only I had this person's talent, if I only had this person's charm, charisma, um, if only my contribution was more visible. But the lesson we have here from the Mishkan and the carrying of the items is that holiness isn't measured by what's visible. It's not measured by visibility, but holiness is measured by responsibility, and possibly even say not possibly, definitely by purpose as well. So the beams or the pegs certainly weren't glamorous. But without the beams, without the pegs, you're not going to have that Mishkan, you're not going to have the tabernacles standing. So every person in the community quietly carry the structure. And of course, this is so relevant to our own community, where a person could think it's only X or Y that are important members of the community. And the answer is that each and every one of us that carry the Mishkan, in today's terminology, it means we carry the community, we build the community. Every one of us is needed. We have to realize that we're carrying the Mishkan, we're carrying the tabernacle of our times. Um, Rav Hunter once beautifully wrote. He may have said it and it was subsequently written down, so I'm not sure which of the two, but he said that people admire the finished product of greatness, but rarely do they admire the burden that greatness requires. So everyone wants meaning, but perhaps not everyone is willing to take on the responsibility. But Judaism teaches us that meaning comes only through responsibility. If you look at the word achrayut, which means in Hebrew responsibility, it has as the shoresh, it has as the root aleph chet reish, which means acher, which means the other. And again, that's obviously telling us that real greatness begins when life stops being only about me, myself, but we look for others as well. We're part of a bigger picture. And that's why the Leviim, they weren't part of the census of Parshas Bamidbar, as you know. They were counted through carrying, because a Jew isn't defined merely by what we believe, but a Jew is defined by what we carry, what we prepare to carry. What burdens, in inverted commas, are we willing to carry? What responsibilities are we willing to accept? What sacrifices are we willing to make? And again, as you know by now, often do this as well, is try contrast what Torah teaches us and modern culture, if you like. So modern culture is telling us to reduce your burdens, right? Simplify your responsibilities, protect your freedom, take it easy. And Torah tells us the opposite. Torah tells us carry more, give more, take responsibility. And as we know, and each of you, I'm sure, in your own lives would have experienced this, that it's when we're carrying more, when we're doing more, that in fact we find that our lives are that much more purposeful, that much more meaningful. Think about the exhausted mother, the committed teacher, a devoted volunteer, caregiver, community leader. You can give many, many examples of it. Their lives may not be easy, but their lives are full, right? They're meaningful, they're purposeful. And that's the idea of burden and meaning being deeply connected. Um, Again, taken out of the realm of religious leaders or Torah commentators, if you just think about Viktor Frankl and his observations and his writings, he says that people can survive almost any type of suffering if they feel it has a meaning. Okay, and of course, the opposite would also be true as well. And the idea being, ultimately, the responsibility creates purpose. And we find this, the Leviim teach us that carrying isn't a punishment, carrying is a privilege. So what we think maybe is a burden, And by the way, there's a beautiful idea that when the people carried the ark, it was weightless. It was as though it carried them. And that's the concept as well, that it's often our burdens which make us the better people. Maybe not in the moment, but certainly afterwards, we're able to look back and see how those burdens, in inverted commas, actually carried us, actually lifted us, and transported us on our respective journeys. Okay, moving on to the second point, and that's the concept of the camp that has to be holy. So the Torah speaks about, the Parsha speaks about those people who were sent out of the camp because anyone who was spiritually impure wasn't allowed to remain inside the camp. So we can think that maybe at first glance, this seems harsh. Why remove someone from the camp? Why do we have to isolate them? But again, Torah teaches us something very profound, very important. And that is that environment matters, right? Where we're at, where we are, where we find ourselves, who we surround ourselves with matters. What we expose ourselves to matters. What enters our mind, what we allow to enter our minds matters. Um, and again, if we just contrast this to the times that we find ourselves in again, the world around us, so it's a generation that unfortunately treats all environments as equal. Like everything's fine, nothing affects me, I can handle it. I'm not going to be influenced. It's okay to be there. It's okay for my kids to be there. But Judaism teaches us exactly the opposite, that environments where we place ourselves actually shapes our souls. A person who constantly absorbs negativity is obviously going to unfortunately become a negative person. If you're surrounding yourselves with negative people, if you constantly going to be around people who are cynics, you're going to eventually lose your idealism. Um, and again, if you're constantly absorbing impurity, and however we want to identify or define that in our lives today, obviously over time we're going to become spiritually desensitized. So Torah tells us that the camp must remain spiritually elevated. It's not because Torah, God forbid, despises certain people. No, these are normal people. They just happen to become impure. But Judaism understands human psychology and that we become what we surround ourselves with. Um, so much, I mean, so much, I really can say so much about this. And again, about generation, the times that we find ourselves in, that we've actually got so much spiritual distraction. We've so consumed, and we consume so much information. But again, we've probably never been a time in history where we've struggled so much on actually focusing. And so the Mishkan represents, the tabernacle represents the clarity, it represents consciousness, it represents holiness. And the Torah tells us we need to protect the camp. And again, of course, it doesn't only refer to the Mishkan as it was in biblical times, it refers to our own inner sanctuary. You've got to make sure that we are keeping our inner camp holy and sacred. The Chofetz Chaim, he in fact once compared the human mind to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, where the ark was stationed. And he said that imagine someone entering the Holy of Holies with garbage. Imagine, God forbid, the high priest comes into the Holy of Holies and there he's got his garbage bags and he dumps it there. It's unthinkable. But if we think about what we're doing all day, we're allowing spiritual garbage to come into our minds all day long, and of our children and of those people that we care for. And then we wonder why we're so physically exhausted. It's probably because not only physically and mentally, it's spiritual exhaustion. And so the Torah reminds us, protect the camp, meaning protect your mind, protect your soul, protect your standards. Because again, whatever repeatedly enters us, whatever we are allowing ourselves to absorb is eventually going to shape us. Again, I'll just cross-reference with what it says in Pirkei Avot. You're all familiar with, Harchek mishachein ra, distance yourself from a bad neighbor. Widen that, and it means from bad influences. Make sure you're in the correct environment. Okay, then the parasha moves on to the concept of confession and ownership. And it says when a man or a woman commits a sin, they need to confess about the sin they committed. And this really teaches us, again, another profound concept in Judaism, that growth begins with honesty, not denial, not excuses, not blame, but honesty. And again, in a world that gives excuses and gives rationalization, it's not my fault, or everyone does it, or I didn't have a choice. And of course, again, let me say that there are times when this could be the case, which where circumstances do affect people. But again, Judaism instills in us and insists that we have to always have moral ownership over what we do and of our choices. And when we do make mistakes, it's okay. God knows that we're fallible or we make mistakes, but we've got to be able to confess. We've got to be able to be honest. And it's through that honesty where the healing begins. And that's where the greatest freedom takes place, right? When we free ourselves of that guilt, of that burden. I mentioned something, carrying sin. So when we let that go, when we're honest about it and we confess to it, it eventually begins the healing. David HaMelech, King David said, um, or rather I should say, what really made David HaMelech great wasn't the fact that he never sinned, because we know that he did sin. But again, when he was confronted with his sin, if you remember the famous words, he says, Chatati la Hashem, I've sinned before Hashem. So he immediately acknowledged that he didn't deny. And his greatness was knowing that I'm not meant to be perfect. And what true greatness is honesty, being honest about what I've done and trying to repair, not hiding from reality. Again, we live in a world where we're trying to always protect our image, but maybe we should work more about protecting our character or improving our character, rather so much about this image that we're always trying to portray. If you think about it, image is something that's external. Character is internal and maybe even eternal. And again, Judaism always values truth over appearance. So again, Torah tells us, I was wrong. If you're going to say I was wrong, I need to improve. I need help. It shows that the person is spiritually alive. If you think about what inside of ourselves causes us to sin, or what is the antithesis of confession and beginning to do teshuvah, is ego, a person's ego. So whereas an ego hates confession, our soul innately loves confession. Because again, the ego wants to appear perfect. The soul just wants to become better. So again, an important lesson from the Parsha. Now we get to the episode of the Soita, the suspected adulteress. Very difficult section in the Torah, but let me just approach it from this way. What it is in no uncertain terms is that a marriage has broken down, right? Suspicion has entered, and unfortunately, you've got a situation where trust between the parties has collapsed. And the Torah creates a process dealing with this. But beneath the halachic details, there's actually a heartbreaking reality that something precious, obviously this marriage has deteriorated. We know that relationships, not only a marriage, but all relationships, don't just collapse overnight. Um, it gets worse, it deteriorates moment by moment, right? Distance grows slowly, neglect grows slowly, communication weakens slowly. It's not just you're not speaking to your spouse from one day to the next. Unfortunately, it's just a slippery slope that unfortunately keeps getting worse. And one day, unfortunately, people wake up, maybe when it's too late, and they're emotionally disconnected. The Torah places the episode of the Sota immediately before the Nazir, the Nazarite, because the Torah is actually warning us that if we don't actively do something to protect our spiritual and emotional lives, then decline, unfortunately, is going to happen. And gradually, it's going to get us into that untenable situation of what happens with the suspected adulteress. And again, just like any other relationship, excuse me, no marriage stays strong automatically. Our spirituality also doesn't automatically stay vibrant and alive. Our relationship with Hashem is the same. And it's, of course, the message that everything meaningful, any meaningful relationship in our lives requires investment. And we really have to be consistent, those small acts, that daily effort. And if we're not going to do that, if we're not going to do those small acts, then unfortunately and we're not going to do the things necessary to protect, like the Nazir does, which I'm going to speak about now, then unfortunately we're going to land ourselves in a position where unfortunately things could unfortunately go very pear-shaped, put it like that. The Nazir. So the Nazir, as you know, is someone who takes upon an oath of abstinence and grows his hair long. He's not allowed to come into contact with dead, even close relatives, not allowed to drink wine or come into any contact or taste derivatives of wine. So why does a person do this? So, and again, linking to what I just said about the sota, it's because a person, the sota being the suspected adulteress, is a person realized that if I'm going to continue to live passively, unfortunately, I'm going to drift. And the Nazir, the Nazarite, understands that neutrality or just remaining where I am is actually an illusion. Because in life, as you know, that we're either growing or declining. There's nothing in Judaism calling I'm staying the same or I'm stagnant. Stagnant means decline. And therefore, what the Nazir does, it creates boundaries. Now, I want to first state that the ideal in this world is to be able to partake of all the physical pleasures that Hashem gives us, but to bring spirituality into that. The Nazir, for whatever reason, feels he needs to create boundaries because if those boundaries aren't there, he's going to slide into sin. And again, if we think about boundaries today, it's the antithesis of modern culture, right? Modern culture worships indulgence, more entertainment, more consumption, more stimulation. And someone who looks to exercise restraint is often viewed as strange, right? He's the outlier. But the Torah admires self-control, and that's what the Nazir does. He doesn't do it forever. He does it for a specific period of time. And it's that time in order to give him the boundaries in which to find his freedom. So again, we often think as well that Torah limits us. Torah is boundaries. But Torah actually gives us the freedom in which to live with meaning and purpose. And if we think about all the great people in history who were prepared to do things different, who were prepared to go against the flow, and everyone must think the same and dress the same and believe the same. Think about all the great people in Jewish history. Abraham was called Ivri from the other side. He was different. Moshe was different. Ruth, who we read about now over Shavuot, was different. Rabbi Akiva, who converts, he is different. So again, Torah teaches us a greatness is when we stop asking what will other people think and we start thinking what is best for me and what does Hashem want from me. So even though abstaining from the physical pleasures of this world is not first prize, there are times where a person needs to be able to understand himself and herself, to know that I need to put in extra safeguards or boundaries to protect myself, to make sure that I'm not going to, God forbid, do anything that I'm going to regret. Okay, let me move on quickly to Birkat Kohanim. The blessing that the Kohanim blesses, or what we say to our children on the Friday night as well, comes from this week's Parsha. Right? May Hashem bless you, protect you. May Hashem illuminate his face towards you. May Hashem lift his face towards you and grant you peace. What's fascinating over here is that the Kohanim don't give the blessing. The blessing we know emanates from Hashem. The Kohanim are merely the channels. But yet the Kohanim are commanded to bless the people. Why? And simply put, Judaism understands the extraordinary power of words. We know words on the one hand can build people, right? Positive words, but negative words, unfortunately, are the opposite, can destroy people, right? How many adults spend years, God forbid, recovering from bad words spoken to them in their childhood? Or maybe people can remember a teacher that gave them such positive words and they were able to build their lives upon what that teacher believed in them. So Torah therefore commands blessing. And the Birkat Kohanim reminds us that we are supposed to become blessers wherever we go. Again, the Kohanim were the ambassadors, the Kohanim were the role models, what we're supposed to do. And we're supposed to also give blessings to everyone else in our lives, to uplift, to encourage, to strengthen, to inspire. And of course, the blessing ends with the concept of peace. because we know that blessings without peace aren't blessings. You know, you can have money, but if you've still got worries, you don't have peace, the money isn't really a blessing. What is peace in Torah terminology? It's that shleimut, from the same word shalom. It's completeness. It's the complete alignment, our inner alignment, that what we're doing aligns with what we want to be doing, right? We feel that we're true to who we really are. Um, a lot more to say about that, but I'm just going to quickly go on to the last topic, and that is the gifts that the priests, the leaders of the tribes bring. And again, you'll read it over Shabbos. It's actually the reading as well over Hanukkah, and it's the exact same gifts that each of the leader of the tribes brings, yet it goes through it again in detail under each tribe. And the question is why? Just simply say 12 tribes, 12 leaders of the 12 tribes brought these gifts on for the inauguration of the temple. That's it. Would have had two psukim, two verses, rather than two columns of the Torah. Why the repetition? And what is Torah trying to teach us over here? That even though externally on the outside all the gifts looked the same, truthfully, internally, every offering was different. Why? How is that? Because again, each tribe had different intentions. Each tribe or tribal leader had different emotions, different spiritual pathways, different motives. And the Torah gives each one individual dignity by mentioning it again. Beautiful lesson again in Judaism, that people may externally perform the same mitzvah, right? You've got to daven, or you've got to, but internally each soul is different. How do we daven? How do we give charity? What is our feelings? What are our intents? And Hashem listens to each one of us individually. And the Torah repeats the gifts that the tribal leaders brought, because again, Torah and Hashem values individuality. Now, I just want to say this. Maybe now looking back, we can maybe understand the thread that goes through the Torah. It says, Nasso et Rosh, lift up the head. Because again, we can rise, we can carry. We've done it throughout the generations. Jews have overcome so much difficulty, so much persecution as a nation. And personally, we've got so much. Our faith has allowed us to carry so much. And so it was with all these different things. The Levites carrying, and through their carrying, they were counted. Again, the Levites, ambassadors for us, it's through our carrying. What we prepared to do, that's how we count, and that's how we make ourselves count. If we sin, we can carry tremendous burden, but if we're prepared to acknowledge what we've done, then that burden gets released and we'll be able to carry on burden free. Again, if we are careful in our relationships and make sure we're doing everything right all the time, the small things that matter, we're not, God forbid, allowing neglect to come into our relationships, then that marriage should be able to carry through, that relationship should be able to carry through, should never go to any situation of suspicion, God forbid. Whether it's the blessings that the Kohanim as leaders carry, the responsibility of being the conduits for blessing, but we also have to make sure that all our words are blessings to other people. And finally, to remember that even though we perform the same mitzvah, we learn the same Torah, how we carry our duties differs from one person to another. Hashem values, Hashem realizes that each of us are individuals, each of us have something that we have to contribute, and on the external, it must seem that we're doing exactly the same thing, but it's what we bring to the party from our unique individual neshama perspective that Hashem truly values, that Hashem says, lift up your head and I will count you. Wish everyone a good Shabbos, and as always, thank you for joining. Have a good night.